Wait, hold it. I know the game's inexorably tied to this song, but this is YouTube in 2016, and, well, can we start over with music that is at least a little less likely to be flagged? There's never been a racing game quite like Burnout Paradise. Oh, there have been open-world racers before, like Need for Speed Underground, and we've had plenty of crashy, arcadey racing games, including the previous games in the Burnout series. And yeah, Burnout Paradise has informed subsequent games, Criterion's Need for Speed Most Wanted perhaps most of all, and its influence can still be felt in series like Forza Horizons, where billboards can be broken, boost is rewarded for driving close to oncoming traffic or drifting, and races take place in an open world anchored by a few key points of interest. And yet there's something about Burnout Paradise in particular that helps it endure more than a lot of those other racing games. I still replay most of it once every year or so. But why this game with its obnoxious DJ Atomica, its missing PC content, and its awkward EA login screen? Well, last year I suggested that Destiny is like a pack of knockoff brand sci-fi action figures you sort of imposed your own imagination onto. I think Burnout Paradise works in a similar way. It is basically a Hot Wheels racetrack blown up to a grandiose scale. Okay, Trackmania is probably Hot Wheels racetracks blown up to a grandiose scale, but Burnout Paradise feels like an attempt to recapture what it means to play with toy cars as kids and present it in a way that's palatable to adults. So, how does it do that? Well, first, Burnout Paradise excels as an open-world game in ways that few others do. It understands that open worlds aren't about the spaces between points of interest, they're about making the space itself interesting. Too many open-world games are designed to take you to 10 or 15 key locations, while the rest of the map exists to provide optional content on the side. Those games encourage you to explore, but there's also the skeleton of a main storyline or a main quest line to provide some sort of structure. Approaching world design this way undercuts whatever narrative the main storyline may have, robbing it of urgency and any sense of pacing whatsoever. Take Skyrim, for example, where in the face of the end of the world by dragon invasion, you can hang out with some thieves, or get married, or become the leader of the Mages Guild for funsies. The optional content feels self-contained and disconnected to the point where it feels like filler, while the main story stuff is super important but can be deferred so easily that it feels like it just doesn't matter. Burnout Paradise avoids this by making any and all exploration the main use of the space. Exploration isn't a fun side thing, it's literally what you do in this game. Your goal is to find events, complete them, and rank up to a Burnout license. Since just about every intersection has an event, and every event counts towards your license, none of the events are really quote-unquote side missions. The game's exploration is more about finding a style of event that you like than veering off from the main questline. This way, the whole map becomes important in ways that other open-world games neglect, and Burnout Paradise feels internally cohesive in a way that Skyrim doesn't, because the whole space is used to progress instead of just a few key areas. But it succeeds as an open-world game by doing more than just saying every quest contributes to the main quest, so, just do whatever. There's a ridiculously meticulous use of space in this game. Burnout Paradise rewards exploration not just with events, but super jumps, billboards, and shortcuts. Each of them give the game a sort of collectible aspect, but, and this is key, those things are still useful after they're found. Super jumps and billboards refuel boost and are counted as a score multiplier during stunt runs, and shortcuts can give you the edge in a tight race or lead to a great stunt run area. You don't just explore to find the random shiny collectibles, you explore because complete knowledge of this space makes you a far better, more capable player than you would otherwise be. It's also shockingly dense. Most open-world games are proud about how large their maps are, how many square miles of terrain are reproduced. But the philosophy driving Burnout Paradise is to provide an average-sized map and then simply pack it to the brim with stuff. In addition to proper events at intersections and all those collectibles, each road has a time trial associated with it, allowing you to compete against default times or against your friends. Each road also has a crash mode, a mini-game where you try to maximize damage to other cars by bouncing the remains of your vehicle off of cars and buses. On roads with parallel parking spots, there's even a mode where you try to drift perfectly into a parking space. And there are secret airfields and quarries for stunt runs. Unlockable cars can pass you anywhere on the road, triggering a mad dash to wreck them before they escape, turning any back alley into an opportunity for a showdown.
The Krieger Pioneer has been delivered to your junkyard.
It's a refreshing approach to open world design because often the goal is to simply provide space between things to do, but Burnout Paradise was about filling that space with things to do. It's sort of a Tony Hawk Pro Skater school of level design. You don't need a massive amount of space as long as every piece of that space is designed to play off one or more of the mechanics, and that lesson is taken to heart here. All of these densely packed and interconnected activities, collectibles, and events present a world that is, for lack of a better word, playful. The game world feels less like a lived-in real city than one of those top-down city road rugs you'd have as a kid, or one of those pre-constructed plastic parking garages. It's not just the design of the game world that really works for me, though. The other reason that Burnout Paradise shines is that it feels like it's in love with cars, but not in the way video games normally are in love with cars. Like, most arcade racers don't care about the vehicles at all. Mario Kart or Sonic All-Star Racing put you in some wacky nonsense vehicles, and even car-focused arcadey racers like Blur or Split Second aren't into the cars themselves as much as the on-screen hijinks. No, games that care about cars are usually the more self-serious racing games like Gran Turismo or Forza. Their cars are exotic consumer goods, fetishized to the point of being eroticized. There's an undeniable sexiness in the way they talk about and frame cars. The slow close-up pans, the meticulous detail with which they're rendered, the usual options to inspect or take photos of them. The relationship borders on the voyeuristic. And then there's the brands, always with the brands. Car manufacturers are treated as storied institutions that demand reverence. Forza actually has a mechanic that lets you build affinity with individual manufacturers as you race with their label.
Every time you level your car's manufacturer affinity level, you increase that manufacturer's payout bonus. Each race you run in that brand of car earns you bonus credits based on its affinity level.
There's as much focus on the logos and licensing as the tuning mechanics and paint selection. These video games typically present cars as min-max stat modification toys for the super rich, and they let you have a taste of their power, their glamour, and the smarts it takes to tweak them. They're engineering feats to be lusted after, their conspicuous consumption you get to experience vicariously through a video game. But if Forza or Gran Turismo talk about cars the way your gearhead coworker talks about cars, Burnout Paradise talks about cars the way your third-grade nephew talks about cars. It's not about the sexiness of real cars as a consumer good, but cars as the power fantasies kids have before they become the mundane thing that drives you to work and that you have to pay taxes on and get inspected. Races, crashes, leaps and rolls, the roar of the engine and the squeal of the brakes, the crunch of metal and the smell of gasoline. For example, the consumer fetishism is pretty much absent. Gone are the loving tributes to real brands. Instead, we have fictional car manufacturers. Their names, like Krieger, Catano, Carson, and Rossellini, as well as their logos, tell you a lot about the kinds of cars they make, and provide what is perhaps the closest the game actually really gets to world building. And instead of sleek, shiny vehicles for purchase, every car you unlock in Burnout Paradise has been junked. Piles of scratched metal, dented exteriors, and broken glass are your rewards in this game, and you pick them up in a junkyard. Cars in Forza or GT are placed in showrooms and cleaned gently with diapers, but these cars get used up. They're scratched and worn and beaten because the cars get crashed and raced and played with. Even the act of unlocking new vehicles itself frames cars in a completely different way. Compare buying a known quantity in a Ford Focus that's been put in a racing class with certain performance stats with, hey, a new car, what's it handle like? How fast does it go? How cool does it look when we fix it up? What are the different paint jobs? One is a cold, mechanical purchasing decision, and the other is full of curiosity and excitement. It's not a strategic decision or one we make out of brand loyalty, but a question. What can this car do? Can it do things? Let's find out. The lack of brands also means Burnout can indulge in a gratuitous damage model. Burnout Paradise loves crashes. It loves them so much it has a mode just for crashing. It loves them so much it has an event dedicated to causing them. It loves them so much it actually cuts away from racing to show you each and every crash in slow motion. Burnout Paradise firmly believes that crashing is a cool phenomenon. Again, it's a childhood toy mentality here. There's no one in these cars, there isn't a perverse fascination with real car crashes, but rather it's a video game version of a kid going kapoosh with their Matchbox cars. And that's hardly a deep read. The game actually makes the point itself by literally including toy cars as a DLC pack that is miniature, uncrashable versions of the several cars from the game. Also helping sell the whole idea that this is a childhood power trip made by adults, there's an odd, subtle nostalgia about the whole thing. For instance, there's a Famous Cars DLC pack that contains parody cars of vehicles from the Dukes of Hazzard, Knight Rider, Ghostbusters, and my personal favorite, Back to the Future. They're cute callbacks, but they're also, all of them, definitively from the 80s. So too is the Carson Inferno van, a reference to the A-Team's vehicle of choice. Then there's the song. Burnout Paradise has 3 soundtracks, an EA Tracks licensed affair, a bunch of classical music, and a selection of techno and rock tracks from previous Burnout games, including a Burnout Paradise theme song. But it's Guns N' Roses' 1987 song Paradise City that plays at the beginning and end of the game, as well as every time the game is launched, in its entirety. Burnout Paradise has hitched itself to that song in particular, and it cements itself as having one foot in the past. Specifically the past of the game's 20 and 30-something-year-old developers. There's a real sense of the developers reaching back to their own childhood to find what made cars special before they could realistically drive them, and trying to capture that feeling in this game. And there's 2 ways to look at that. This game could be seen as immature, afraid of dealing with more intellectually stimulating ideas like tuning suspensions or choosing tire treads. It is a game that is all vroom vroom crash without any respect for the engineering, the history, the culture of cars. But another way of looking at it is that it has a sense of wonder about cars unclouded by crass commercialism or arcane technical details. It loves cars exactly because they are vroom vroom crash machines, and that makes the game somewhat timeless, or at least as timeless as the idea of cars can be, given that they've only been around for 100 years. Anyway, in the following years, games like Need for Speed Most Wanted and Forza Horizons have tried to expand on the Burnout Paradise formula, and neither has really managed to recapture it. And I think it has a lot to do with these 2 ideas, a really strongly designed and dense open world, and a sort of naive wonderment at the concept of cars. Their worlds are larger but feel far more empty. They feel less interested in cars than they do in brands. But Burnout Paradise not only managed to do both of those things, but combine them in a way where they complement each other really well. The open world nature sells us on that big promise of cars, the freedom to go anywhere and do as we please, and that undeniably playful sense of the game world just gels with that childlike sensibility about cars. It's not an open world about trudging from key point to key point, and it's not a serious racing sim asking you to choose a strength of shock absorber before the race. It's a kid unbearably eager and excited for you to sit down and join them in playing with their toy cars. And even at 30 years old, I have a hard time saying no to that.